Hello and welcome to Hot Issues, and today we are looking generally at land administration in Ghana, its problems, its prospects. How can we use land for development? What are the problems that have bedeviled land acquisition and so on? And again, we are fortunate to have a very, very well accomplished legal practitioner to do the discussion with us. Welcome to Hot Issues. Welcome to Hot Issues. As I said from the very beginning, we are looking at land, the question of land. Land as an instrument for national development, the administration of land, the problems, and so on. And we are especially privileged to have with us Mr. Kwame Gyan, a law practitioner, a law lecturer, and a businessman. So you're welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Kwesi. How have you been?
Oh, well.
Long time.
Trying to hold body and soul together.
You shall be well.
Yeah.
You shall be well.
What is the nature of the problem with land administration in Ghana? Is there a problem? What is the problem?
Yeah, Kwesi, there are problems. The problems are a couple, but they are interrelated. One set of problems has to do with the legal arrangements. Another set of problems has to do with the institutional arrangements. And then there is a cross-cutting problem which has to do with the ownership regime of land. So, in talking about the problems, I will summarize by saying that we have the legal, the institutional, and the cross-cutting ownership and its related problems. So, broadly, three problems.
What does this mean in real terms? What's the difference between the legal and the institutional and the cross-cutting? What is the cross-cutting problem?
The cross-cutting problem is who is the owner of the land? What rights does the owner have over that parcel of land? What rights can a third party have over that parcel of land? How can the owner dispose of that land? What can the owner do with that land? All of these are cross-cutting because sometimes institutions come up and sometimes legal issues come up. Now, when you come to the institutional challenges, we have the customary regime of land management and we have the state system of land management. So we have the institutions like the Lands Commission with its subdivisions. We have the town and country planning, which is not part of the Lands Commission actually. We have the EPA. We have the Minerals Commission. We have several government agencies.
Survey department.
Survey department is now part of the Lands Commission.
Okay.
Because of the passage of Act 767 of 2008. Mm-hmm. So the Survey Department, which used to be independent, is now part of the reconstituted or reorganized Lands Commission. Mm-hmm. And then there are what I call the legal problems. The legal problems are multifaceted. Some of the problems have to do with the age of some of the laws we apply. Some of the laws are very old. They were passed to address land challenges of yesteryear, and they drop when they confront the challenges of today and the challenges we are looking up into the future. So we need to overhaul some of the laws and bring them into currency with our modern day exigencies. So that is one of the problems. Then there is the other problem. In the legal terminology, we call it legal pluralism. Now we are running a country in which more than one system of law is applicable simultaneously. So in this country, sometimes Sharia law applies. Sometimes the law we call the common law, which is part of British law, and our customary law, which is the law applicable to particular communities in this country. The Constitution in Chapter 4 says that is also part of our law. So you have state law, you have religious law, you have customary law, you have constitutional law, subsidiary legislation. I mean, a hydra-headed body of law running simultaneous in the same legal system.
So how do we overcome all of these difficulties with definition, with different types of laws which are sometimes conflicting and so on? As a state, the state of Ghana, what do we do in order to regularize all that you have described?
Yeah, what the state has to do is this. The Constitution has provided for which norms of the legal order takes precedence in the event of a conflict. So we should look at our Constitution and look at all the laws that are in place for the land sector, and then rationalize the laws against our constitutional dispensation and the modern day challenges of land management and land administration. Because for some time I was at the Ministry of Lands and this effort started. There is a draft lands bill in place which got to a very advanced stage of preparation, including consultations with relevant parliamentary bodies and committees. So the bill is really advanced. I believe by this time it should be heading towards cabinet for cabinet clearance before you present to Parliament for consideration and so on. So that framework has been developed, and this came out of a project undertaken for more than 8 years. So about 8 years of work has gone into it. I believe that if the system can rekindle that spirit under Lab 2, we could get a Lands Act in place which takes care of the substantive rules for land management and land administration in this country. The part of the law that deals with the institutional part has been dealt with in 2008 with the passage of the new Lands Commission Act, which I previously mentioned, Act 767, which merged the previously separate institutions. You know, previously there was the Survey Department, the Land Title Registry, the Land Registry, the Lands Commission itself. Now all these institutions were brought together under one umbrella. It was supposed to provide a one-stop shop for land service delivery and customer service. And there were other things which had to be done to bring full effect the benefit of this law to the public. But some of the things which were supposed to be done have not been done yet.
What are some of those things that were supposed to be done, or which should be done anyway?
One was to look at the human beings who work in the land sector. Look at those whose competences are not adequate for present day land administration, and kind of let go that crop of persons and put in place a new crop of people who understand the dynamics of modern day land administration. So there was going to be a human resource overhaul as part of the reforms which were undertaken under Lab 1. I don't know where they have reached because I've been out of it from about 2011 thereabouts. There was also going to be co-location, so human beings were to be moved. So persons who were previously in the survey department or land valuation department were going to be moved from land valuation into the public invested lands division, for example, so that you physically move people to let them know that the institutions which were previously separate are no longer separate. Then there was going to be a transcription, a kind of digitization of all the manual records, because that is one of the problems. The records we have on the land sector are in manual format. Some of them are falling apart. Paper over time breaks, and information. Some you will see if you look at some of the records, portions of the paper are torn off, and these are land ownership information that are very critical. Now, if there is a fire, given the propensity, the threats of fire outbreaks in the country, if you are relying on manual records, paper form records, and there is a fire outbreak at the Lands Commission, and these records get burnt, we are finished. So one aspect of the reform was to convert the documents from manual to digital format. That process also started, and it would have been a very major intervention, because then you could have been able to do a search from your office. In the UK, when we paid a visit to Her Majesty's Land Registry, lawyers and other persons who are doing conveyance and land transfers, who are licensed, are able to access the records of Her Majesty's Land Registry to determine the status of particular parcels of land. You know, so, because there were things that had to be done. You know, and there are people who know what has to be done,
and yet they are not being done.
Exactly.
Where do we start from? It appears that there is quite a considerable mess in land administration. Where do we start from? There are others who say that we need to have uniformed land ownership. Who should own land?
Kwesi, uniform land ownership legally entails a lot. Now, how to deliver on that proposition is for the state to take over the land. If you are talking about a uniform land ownership, then the only answer I will give you is state ownership.
Would that be a bad idea?
Yes and no.
The yes first, the no first, the no first, and then the yes.
The no is this. When you create state ownership of land, ultimately, what you do, Kwesi, is you create a bureaucracy that is going to substitute the chiefs and the family heads.
You may create.
Yes, I would make it may. There's a high possibility.
Well, it's still a possibility.
It's a high possibility.
But it's still a possibility.
Yes.
Yeah.
That you are going to replace the chief and the landowner, the family head, with a bureaucrat. So at the end of the day, what you have done is just to replace people in cloth and smock with people in suit and tie. Their behavior will not be different. If you look at how we have managed those lands which were taken by the state. Because if you look at what we have done with state lands in this country, what you see is that if the state took over, we would be making bureaucrats like chiefs and family heads. And what will be different actually is that in most cases when the state took over, the areas that the state took over are nice areas. And that is the reason why politicians like those areas. So if you go back into the history of this country, Kwesi, cantonments, Rage, some areas in Kanda, Dansoman, those were the areas where the state took over. And when the state takes over, the state plans the neighborhoods. So Tema. And this is why I'm saying that yes and no. The yes part is that when the state comes in, the state is able to make the areas nice. But the state can still ensure that we develop properly according to plan without becoming the owner of the land. What the state can do is to ensure that land use is strictly adhered to, land use plans. So you are the owner of the land, but the state determines what you do with your land.
Now, this is your no answer. What about your yes answer?
If I said yes in terms of the state taking over, the multiple owners would be gone. So, you know, in this country, there are family lands, there are stool lands, and even within the stool areas, there are families that own large areas of land. The accountability systems which we had in the institution of chieftaincy and the family system many years ago have all collapsed. So mostly chiefs are not accountable to their people. family heads are also not accountable to their people. So it looks like, if you look at what is going on in town currently, you might want the state to come in and say, look, hold it. I have taken over the land. But they have serious constitutional implications because of Article 20 of the Constitution.
Constitutions can be changed.
Yes, the Constitution can be changed, but the Constitution in Article 20 and Article 18 talks about the guarantee of property rights, and that private property can only be taken if it is taken under a law which makes provision for the payment of fair and adequate compensation. So if the state is taking over, then we must be prepared to compensate the owners. But this is a question that all of us should debate, and we should be dispassionate about it. In some parts of the world, the state is not the owner of the land. I'll give you the American example. In the US, they have a duality of ownership of even natural resources. So, in the US, the state is not the owner of all oil or all minerals. If there is mineral in your private land, you are the owner of the mineral. If there is oil in your private land, you are the owner of the oil. If there is oil in public land, the state, the United States of America, is the owner of the oil in the public land.
But the reverse is true in Ghana.
But in this country, because of Article 257, Clause 6 of the Constitution, all minerals in their natural state are the property of the Republic.
Yeah.
And it is held in trust by the President on behalf of all of us. But you see, Kwesi, there is always a correlation between the laws of a country and the history of the people. And it looks like we should let our development goals influence what laws we pass. It is possible that some of the laws we pass were influenced by ideology. Now, we are confronting bread and butter issues.
But these are colonial laws.
Exactly.
They are colonial. They were instituted by the colonialists.
Exactly. Yeah. And but some of the laws were also instituted by the post-independence government.
No, but the law, for example, which insists that all natural resources in their raw form belong to the state, is a colonial law.
But see, you'll be surprised it's not. I will tell you. The first time we encountered state ownership of natural resources was in the Minerals Act 1962.
Before then,
chiefs and landowners were granting their own mineral rights. You see, in 1962, several pieces of legislation were passed which became the legal architecture of the land sector. We had the Land Registry Act 1922. We had the Administration of Lands Act 1922, 1960. So we had the Land Registry Act 1962, Act 122. We had the Administration of Lands Act 1962, Act 123. We had the Concessions Act 1962, Act 124. We had the State Lands Act 1962, Act 125. And then the Minerals Act 1962, Act 126. And the Survey Act 1962, Act 127. Now, these were passed during the CPP government, isn't it? 1962. So the first time the property in minerals were vested in the state was in the Minerals Act 1962.
Before we move on, what makes one a citizen of Ghana?
Kwesi, this is one of the most difficult questions in constitutional law in this country. Who is a Ghanaian? And sometimes even the best lawyers avoid a discussion of this topic, because if you are not careful, you make utterances which will trigger passions. So, Kwesi, in the quest for the answer to this question, you have to go back to how this country was put together.
Whatever it is,
Ghana.
Whatever it is,
Kwesi, relax.
Couldn't it simply mean that everybody who is a Ghanaian is Ghanaian to the extent that he has an interest in the land called Ghana?
Yes, agree. And it goes back to how the country was put together. Mm-hmm. We had a part of this country called the colony. We had a part called Ashanti. We had a part called the Northern Territories. We had a part called Transvolta Togoland. Now, all these countries have, all these chunks of territory.
Units.
Yes, units. Had their own histories. And they became part of this country through particular histories. Some parts of Ashanti, the whole question about the conquest, then the colony, all these things about the bond of 1844.
The plebiscite.
Exactly. Then the referendum, the plebiscite, which decided whether some part of Togo should come with British trusteeship or some French trusteeship should also go, and so on. So by history of circumstances, we put together this country called Ghana. And we set up a regime which made persons who would have been citizens of the Gold Coast by midnight of March 5th, citizens of Ghana. So we inherited, this is a typical case where a colonial state expired and a new state was born to take over from the colonial state. So there is the predecessor state, which is the colonial Gold Coast, and the successor state called Ghana.
And even beyond the colonial state, there were other states.
Exactly. So these kingdoms, the Ashanti Kingdom, Dagbon, which previously would have been states.
Agreed. I'm not arguing on that. I'm not raising questions on that. I'm saying that to be a citizen of Ghana or of any other nation,
yes,
land is part of the equation.
It's true.
Your stake in the land is part of that equation.
The reason your point is very valid is that even in the customary setting, if you look at how customary communities acquired their land, then there's a very authoritative judgment of the High Court, Justice Ni Ama Olenu, as he then was, famous judge, in a case called Ohimi and Ejei. In Ohimi and Ejei, Justice Olenu laid out the modes by which customary communities acquired their lands. And one of the principal modes of acquisition of land is conquest. Another mode is discovery of undeveloped or what we call terra nullus. So a group walking through the bushes, they find a large tract of land which has not been claimed before, and they settle and they own it up as their land. So if you look at the histories of land acquisition, most of the communities acquire their land by fighting and winning wars, and the vanquished community is removed and their lands are taken over by the victorious community. And because all of us or our ancestors spilled their blood in the wars of conquest, citizenship and land ownership and land access become coterminous.